the Greek period then. So remember, the Greek period is pretty much the beginning of Western civilization. At the beginning of Western civilization. We sometimes think of the Hebrews as maybe the beginnings of Western civilization too. But as far as innovations in science and philosophy and theater, in the arts, the Greeks were the pioneers of civilization. We wouldn't have civilization as we know it today if it wasn't for the ancient Greeks. And there's lots to say about their attitudes, their dispositions, even their religion. Let's start with religion. How much do you guys know about the Greek gods? Maybe we can, let's even come up with like a little list here. You guys tell me. I'll pull a Word document up and we'll come up with a list of the ones you know.
I know somewhat about Persephone and Hades, I believe. Wasn't it there was a story about Persephone and Hades that gave her a pomegranate, and for each seed that she ate, she had to stay with him that time. It was 6 months. Something.
Yeah, I'm not as up on that myth as I probably should be, but Hades, of course, is the Greek god of the underworld, and Persephone is his wife. So yes, yeah, there's all kinds of interesting history between those two. I should probably also mention that the Greek gods have Roman names as well. So Hades is Roman name Pluto. Like the planets are all named after the Greek gods, but the Roman names of them. So Pluto is Hades, Greek god of the underworld. Interesting that the underworld is associated with the planet Pluto, way out in deep space. You'd think it would be Venus, considering that Venus is the hottest planet in the solar system, right? So Hades, Persephone, his wife. What are some other ones you guys know? Maybe you know them from TV shows. Maybe you know them from the Hercules Disney movie, right?
Zeus.
Zeus, the king, right? The king of the gods. Keep messing up my Word document. Zeus / Jupiter. Jupiter is his Roman name. The king. All hail the king, right? He's the god of thunder. No, the god of lightning, actually. God of lightning. The new Thor movie made fun of that, right? I don't know if you guys watched the new Thor movie. But
yeah, I watched.
In Norse mythology, Thor is the god of thunder, right? Whereas in Greek mythology, Zeus is the god of lightning. So they kind of made some jokes about that in the new movie. Yeah, Zeus is known as being a famous womanizer. Right? He can't help himself. He has to sleep with every woman he sees about. Right? That causes him to have multiple children that are half god, half man. Because he oftentimes sleeps with mortal women. Right? So Fun facts about Zeus.
Aphrodite's.
Aphrodite. Aphrodite's Roman name is Venus. Right? The goddess of love, beauty, sexuality. Right? So that is Venus. Venus is or Aphrodite. Aphrodite is Zeus's daughter, right? One of his daughters. The goddess of beauty, love, sensuality.
Medusa. Is she a Greek god?
She's not a god, but she's definitely a part of Greek mythology, right? She's this woman who was cursed, and of course she's cursed where her hair looks like snakes, and she's cursed to be so ugly that if you look at her, you get turned to stone. Right, so she is a I'll put her down here as honorable mention. Medusa is part of Greek mythology. She's a famous monster in Greek myths. There's a famous Greek city named after one of the goddesses. You guys know which one? Famous Greek city. There's also a small town in West Virginia where Concord is that is named after said goddess.
Are you talking about Athena?
Athena, right? Athena, the goddess of wisdom.
The sad fact is Athena goes very well with Medusa, if you know the story on it.
Right, lots of history between those two. Goddess of wisdom. Does Athena have? I'm gonna have to Google it. Does she have a Roman name? Let's see. That's a planet. Yeah, no, there's not a planet named after her. Her Roman name is Minerva, goddess of wisdom. The famous story about her is she was born, she sprang out of Zeus's head. Right? When she was born, Zeus's head split open and she came out of Zeus's head. So she was even born without a mother, which is an interesting story. Yeah, I see you looking so I'm like, what? Right? So sure enough, Athena was born without even a mother. And of course, the town Athens in Greece is named after, as well as West Virginia, as well as Ohio, as well as Georgia. Right, 3 Athens named after Athena. Any of you guys know what Zeus's wife's name was? Zeus's wife, she's the goddess of women. You know this one? She is Hera. Hera is Zeus's wife. So Hera, a lot of the Greek myths, Hera is very jealous because Zeus is always messing around on her. Right, so Hera often is this sort of antagonist in many of these stories. Now Hera is throughout myths she is known to be an advocate for the Greek people. She's always on their side. So is Athena for the most part. Hera and Athena are always pro-Greek in a lot of these stories. You guys know the god of the sun? Who's the god of the sun? You guys know this one?
Apollos.
Apollo, right. Who said that?
Me, Josh.
Josh, right. Very good. Apollo, the god of the sun. Now, Apollo is known as being this sort of really vindictive god. And this comes into play for our reading next week. He's known as being a very spiteful god. He curses people a lot. And I'm going to tell you guys about the Trojan War myths in a second. But Apollo is usually a god who's not on the Greek side. Like, we'll talk about the Trojan War, but he's usually on the Trojan side of matters. He's oftentimes not very much a friend of the Greeks. And he's a god who's going to show up in all these plays we're going to read these first couple of weeks. He's the god who curses the land in Oedipus. He's also the god who he's also part of not Antigone. It's the play that Savannah said you might want to do. Which we're going blank here. The Aeschylus play, Agamemnon, right? He's part of Agamemnon as well. So Apollo, known for being not very much an ally to the Greeks. What about the god of war? You guys know the god of war? There is
Ares.
Ares. Ares, god of war. His Roman name, Mars. The planet Mars is named after Ares. What about the god of the sea? You guys know the god of the sea's name?
Poseidon.
Poseidon. John, you're up on your Greek hit myths, Josh. Very good. Poseidon. His Roman name is Neptune. God of the sea. There's a messenger god. There's a god who delivers messages. He's the mailman of the gods. He is Mercury's his Roman name. It is
Hermes.
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 My brain's getting slow. Messenger god. We've got most of the main players down on our list. There's tons of them for different reasons. But these are all the major players in our list. There's lots of demigods, like Hercules, for instance, is half god, half man. Whenever we get to the Trojan War, Achilles is half man, half god. So there's lots of figures within mythology. One thing I should mention, one reason why I wanted to come up with this list is, well, first, it's going to help you understand these plays. But second, it's understanding the Greek mythology is important to understanding the minds of the Greeks. This is a religion that's not very people friendly. Right? These Greek gods are all selfish, they're vindictive, they'll punish you for reasons you don't know why they're punishing you. Right? If you were in ancient Greece believing in these Greek gods, this wasn't a very hopeful religion to be part of. There wasn't really a heaven in Greek mythology. Pretty much everybody went to Hades. They did believe that you could be reborn and reincarnated. They did believe that you could escape Hades for a while and be reincarnated. Your soul could be reincarnated into a new body. So their beliefs were kind of close to the Eastern world in that respect. But not a very hopeful religion. Whenever Christianity became the dominant religion in Rome, Greek mythology didn't last much longer. it died really quick after Rome became the dominant religion. These are all make for great, interesting stories. They're part of our literature. But one reason why you think yourself, nobody really worships the Greek gods anymore. When I say nobody, there's still some people who do, right? I actually looked up an interesting documentary on YouTube about some people in Greece who still worship the Greek gods. But for the most part, not a very hopeful religion. So this inspires a lot of the literature we're going to read. The gods are vindictive, they'll curse you, they're not the friend of mankind. Because the Greek gods are so selfish, they'll oftentimes decree fate. So like fate is often a theme in some of these Greek plays we want to read. So I hear a person like Oedipus. Like next week, I told you guys we'll learn that he married his own mother and killed his father. Well, he knew early in his life that was a prophecy, and he tried to avoid it. So, but he accidentally did it anyway. So, a question we'll ask ourselves next week, right, is Oedipus a victim, right? Is he a victim of the gods playing cruel tricks on people? Apollo being the main one in this case, right? Is he a victim of fate and Greek gods not really caring about people who are living? So that's a classic example. The Trojan War is part of this early mythology that we'll be going over too. Of course, you got this. This also is very applicable to the other class if some of you guys are in there. But the Trojan War is this famous ancient war between the Greeks and the Trojans. The city of Troy is said to be like where modern day Turkey is, modern day Turkey. But the Trojan War started in mythology because the goddesses had a competition. They were like, which goddess is the best? Right? Which of us is the most fair? Right? Who's the hottest goddess? Right? That's kind of like what they wanted to know. So Hera, the goddess of wisdom, or the goddess of women, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and sexuality. These goddesses went to this dude, this shepherd named Paris. That's who the city of Paris is named after today, Paris, France, right? They went to this shepherd named Paris, just plain average dude in Troy. And they're like, okay, you judge which of us is the most fair. Any of you guys want to venture a guess on which goddess that, knowing how men are, right? Knowing how we men are. Aphrodite, right? He didn't pick the brains. He didn't pick the good mother, the maternal one, right? He picked the goddess of love, beauty, and sexuality, right? Paris thought with not his brain, but his other part in this instance, right? So he picked her, and her reward to him was she's going to give him the most beautiful woman in the world. The most beautiful woman in the world. Well, the most beautiful woman in the world's name is Helen, Helen of Troy. Helen, I'll actually type her name out along with Medusa as an honorable mention. See, Helen of Troy. But Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. The problem with Helen is she's already married. She was married to a Greek king in Sparta named Menelaus. So by taking Helen away against her will, even, right, by manipulating her, this starts a war between the Trojans and the Greeks, the Trojan War. And the myth, I could spend a whole class talking about just this story, right? But the Trojan War was fought between Greece and Troy, and there's lots of characters on both sides of the war. If you guys read the Greek play, the Iliad, this is where all this stuff is told, the story of the war. But basically, on the Greek side, their great warrior's name is Achilles. Achilles. Of course, you guys all know the term today, Achilles heel, right? Achilles heel, the tendon in your leg. Right? But Achilles was a demigod. He was invincible. There's no way that he can be killed in battle. The reason being is his mother, who was a goddess, his mother's name is Thetis. But his mother, when she was a goddess, when Achilles was a little baby, she dipped him in this water that made his skin impermeable. Right? His skin can't be touched by a blade. But she dips him. She dips this little baby. She grabs him by the foot and she dips him like that into the water. Well, the problem is she's grabbing the foot. The foot doesn't get wet, right? So if you tear your Achilles today, right, that's why that's called that, because that's Achilles' one weakness. Well, by the end of the war, Achilles dies because Paris shoots an arrow into his leg. Kind of cowardly, right? He doesn't face him in battle from way off. He kind of shoots an arrow right into that part of his leg, and that leads to his demise. But Achilles is the famous Greek hero. Hector is the famous Trojan hero of the story. So it's a story all about the gods. How are the gods manipulating the war? So Apollo the whole time is pro-Trojan. Athena and Hera the whole time are pro-Greece. Zeus kind of is trying to stay neutral as best as he can. He doesn't want to get involved. But a lot of the time he'll take the Greek side just because he doesn't want Hera nagging at him over it. Like Hera's often depicted as this great nag. So the Iliad is the famous account of the story. Now I bring all this up because in the play, you guys aren't going to read the Iliad. That's a subject for another class. But the plays all make mention of this mythology of the Trojan War. So knowing these gods, knowing what part they play, especially Apollo, Aphrodite also takes the Trojan side. She's flattered that Paris would pick her, right? So she kind of takes the Trojan side as well. Apollo and Aphrodite are pro-Troy. The other ones are pro-Greece. Well, we know Greece eventually wins, to sum up the story, right? Greece eventually wins. You guys probably all know the story of the Trojan horse, right? They built this big horse that they left it there. The Trojans thought that the Greeks surrendered. Well, the Trojans bring the horse into the city. They all get drunk. And that night when they're all drunk, the Greeks sneak out of the horse and brutally murder them all in their beds while they're drunk, right? So doesn't seem very heroic, does it? Right? But that's how the Greeks eventually win, is through deception. So Agamemnon, the play that you guys will read in a couple of weeks, he is the king of Greece. He's like the overruling king of all the other. He's the king of kings in Greece. So he is his trip home from the war is what that play's about. His trip home, and then he discovers his wife, who is very angry that he's bringing home a Trojan woman to be his sex slave, you might as well say. Now, that's a little bit of Greek myth. Very basic 101 lesson in Greek myth. There's tons I didn't go over. But that gives you enough context where you can maybe approach the stuff. But I should also mention about ancient Greece a few other remarks. Ancient Greece was very much a patriarchal society. This is the society where men call all the shots. Right? Women really didn't have a voice in ancient Greece. Women had no power. Women were, I mean, it sounds horrible to say, but women were pretty much there just to have children. Right? Other than that, they did not play a large role in Greek society. So, if you were a woman living in ancient Athens or something, right, wasn't really the best time to be a lady. Because really, your only role was a domestic role. You couldn't even own property or anything like that in ancient Greece if you're a woman. So, very patriarchal. Women didn't have a lot of power. So later in the class, you'll read that play Lysistrata, which is about women going on a sex strike, right? So the play is about that, but the play is kind of tongue-in-cheek too, because we know that women really don't have a lot of power. So the play's acting like they do, right? So there's like lots of jokes about that. So not the best place to be if you're a lady, ancient Greece. The mores of the time were much different. So it should be noted that their views on things like sexuality were way different. This was a time period where homosexuality was very accepted, right? Much more probably even than it is today. Today, America is growing more and more accepting of that kind of thing. But back then, the Greeks were very accepting of homosexuality. It was normal for them. It wasn't taboo like it later became. So men oftentimes were in relationships with other men. Oftentimes, an older man would take on like a younger boy apprentice, and that they would develop like a professional relationship. That was also part of it. So that was very much a part of their culture. Oftentimes men had more of a relationship with their male lover than they did their own wife, right? It was very accepted and prominent then. Of course, women got with other women too, right? That was accepted then too. There's a Greek island named Lesbos, right? And that's where the word lesbian comes from, right? The Greek island Lesbos. The famous poet Sappho, she is one of their first Greek poets. She is famous for she writes love poems about other women. So that should be noted, that this was a time period where the mores were a little different. They were much more open about stuff like that than we are today. Depending in Greece where you were, that could change things. Like Athens was the city where everything was going on. Athens is where you had philosophy, like you had the famous philosopher Socrates, who, Savannah, you're going to be a teacher, right? You probably know about the word Socratic method. The Socratic method is when a teacher teaches by asking questions. And so, not necessarily how I would do, but oftentimes that's how the class starts. You ask questions, you keep asking questions till you come to some type of knowledge. So law classes, if any of you guys ever go to law school, that's how law classes are taught, Socratic method. Socrates was a famous philosopher. His protege Plato became a famous philosopher. Plato influenced a lot of religion, like even when the Christian religion became a thing, a lot of Plato's ideas seeped into the Christian religion, especially with the writings of Peter and Paul. And Aristotle was Plato's protege. And Aristotle was the guy who pretty much invented the sciences as we know them today. And also the field of literature. So we'll talk about Aristotle some next week, but he invented the field of literary study. So whenever we talk about Oedipus, Aristotle actually wrote a lot about Oedipus because the play was going on while he was living. So he wrote a lot about literature. He wrote a lot about rhetoric. You guys had English 101 and you learned about stuff like logos, ethos, pathos, right? All of that stuff came from Aristotle's book Rhetoric. He wrote about biology. He wrote about physics. This guy was the guy who invented knowledge as we know it today, basically. But ancient Athens was where all this stuff was going on. Ancient Athens was a hopping place to be. Ancient Sparta, you guys know of Sparta. Sparta is the more militaristic society in ancient Greece. You guys have ever watched the 300 movie, right? The 300 Spartans. This is Sparta. Right? Kicks him in the pit, right? If you haven't seen that movie, I'm ashamed of you already, right? Everybody's seen that movie. If you haven't, go watch it. You owe it to yourself. It's a cheesy good time. But the Spartans were the more militaristic society. So from an early age, the boys would have to go in the military service. They didn't have a choice. Their whole society was built on honor, religion, and honor, the warrior code, all that stuff. That was a society that had no room for weakness. Like if you were a young infant, let's say you were a young infant and you were born with some type of like disability or something, the ancient Spartans would actually let a baby out to die, right? They'd leave them out for the wolves to have them. There was no room for weakness in a warrior society like that. So throughout Greek history, there's lots of wars between the Greeks, between the Spartans and the Athenians. Eventually, the Spartans win. Eventually, they sack Athens. Well, when they did, they didn't kill Greek culture. And Greek cultures through Athens still continued on. The reason why we study all this Greek stuff, the reason why we are even still talking about it today, was there was a famous conqueror, Alexander the Great, from Macedon. Alexander conquered all of Greece shortly after the Spartans conquered Athens. Now, of course, he conquered most of the known world. So the reason why Western culture from Greece spread all over the world is because Alexander conquered pretty much the whole world. And in turn, he spread what's called Hellenistic culture to the whole world. So the fact that we're even studying Greek plays today, we wouldn't be doing that probably if it wasn't for Alexander spreading this culture all over the world back in the ancient days when he conquered most of the known world. And as we go through the course, I'll explain some more history to you guys, like why we know Alexander spread the culture, but why does the cultures, like, how do we still have Agamemnon? How do we still have Oedipus the king? How did they survive down to us for 2,500 years? That'll be stuff that we'll talk about all throughout the course. So that's a little bit that's very much a basic introduction to Greece. But I think that probably gives you guys enough of a foundation that you can start your reading this on. So next week, Oedipus and Antigone. for your first week. Like I said, Apollo plays a major role in both those plays. And yeah, a lot of the stuff we talked about, especially religion, we'll have a good conversation with whenever we get to those two next week. So again, I will give the first presentation, might as well say. I'll give a PowerPoint, and I'll do it on Oedipus. I'll be the one I'll do it on. Looking at the chat, I haven't seen it while I was sharing the screen. Patricia, you said you have your play picked out. Which one are you thinking of? She's still with us, Patricia? Maybe she went to the other room while I was ranting. So that's pretty much all I got for today, guys. I feel like that's a pretty good introduction to the class. So good first conversation. I think it's going to be a great semester. And I won't talk in all the future classes as much as I talk today. Okay. I do have a lovely voice, but I've been using my lovely voice all day. So by the time I get to Tuesday evenings, most of the time I'll probably be almost ready for bed most days, right? So I definitely won't talk as much as I did today. Anything else before we call it a night? All right, guys, it was a pleasure. We'll see you guys next week. Read those plays before next class. We'll see you guys then.